Okay, let me now go ahead and introduce to you our keynote speaker for this afternoon session. We are very pleased to have Dr. Patricia Campbell. She is Donald E. Peterson Professor of Music at the University of Washington, where she teaches courses at the interface of education and ethnomusicology. A singer and pianist with studies of the Japanese koto, Celtic harp, Carnatic Indian mridangam, and Bulgarian and Wagogo song, she has lectured internationally on the pedagogy of world music cultures and children's musical cultures. She is the author of a lot of books that we are familiar with: Lessons from the World, Music in Cultural Context, Songs in Their Heads, Teaching Music Globally, Musician and Teacher, Music Education and Diversity, Bridging Cultures and Communities. And she is the co-author of Music in Childhood and Redefining Music Studies in an Age of Change. She is also co-editor of Oxford's 28-volume Global Music Series and Oxford's Global Music Cultures, the Oxford Handbook on Children's Musical Cultures. Campbell is the recipient of the 2012 Taiji Award and the 27 Koizumi Prize for the work on the preservation of traditional music through educational practice, and was awarded the honorary membership in the Society for Ethnomusicology in 2021. Educational consultant to Smithsonian Folkways Recordings, the Alan Lomax Recordings, and the Global Jukebox. She is also editor of the 7-volume series on world music pedagogy for practicing and prospective teachers. We shall hear her pre-recorded talk to us, but she's joining us live today from Washington State to answer your questions later. So please welcome Dr. Patricia Campbell.
Welcome to another address. I'm grateful and feeling honored to be able to connect with you and all of the wonderful people of the Society for Ethnomusicology in the Asia Pacific region, talking about pedagogical integrities at the music learning interface, collaborative efforts in pursuit of intercultural understanding. And we'll move through a number of slides rather quickly to try to make points that do relate to the topical area. I do want to begin with an acknowledgement of the Coast Salish peoples of this land in the Pacific Northwest, on which I live and work. And it is the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. This is the abstract. You may have seen this abstract, attending to distinctive elements of ethnomusicology and music education, and as they collide as fields of scholarship and practice, looking at overlapping complementary manifestations and influences, getting to the point of recognizing the criss-crossing of ethnomusicology and educational practice. And landing with a very quick note on recommendations for collaborations. But we are in the thick of it. We are collaborating, and that is the beautiful thing in recognition of this particular integrity relative to the pedagogy of world music. Honoring mentors seems a good thing to do, and we all wind up climbing to the shoulders of the giants who have come before us. And we see here Barbara Reeder Lundquist and James Carlson of the University of Washington, as well as James Banks. These folks have been active in systematic musicology, ethnomusicology, music education practice, and education with a capital DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they have been great influences to me. As well, my close by colleagues have been wonderfully influential. Folks in ethnomusicology at the University of Washington, as well as in music education. These are the folks with whom we work, and we all influence one another in ways that we cannot begin to give full thanks for. Certainly, for those of us working in music education, we recognize our students, and our students may well be our children in schools, classrooms, anywhere and everywhere. They are guides to understanding musical origins, musical seedbeds for great musical cultures, sophisticated and complicated adult musical cultures, and yet it all starts with children. And it is through children that we learn about learning, as well as the origins of music. Also, to give recognition to folks with whom I've worked collegially in the development of world music pedagogy in book form. These are folks who have been authoring world music pedagogy volumes in the series, and I'm grateful to them, mostly in music education, but with leanings into ethnomusicology and world music practice. This is the series, just to mention it, that is really looking to how we teach music from world cultures, that is to say, local and global cultures, in ways that show pedagogical integrity with respect and full attention to the music and the musicians of these practices worldwide. Certainly, hats off to Bonnie Wade, a collaborator of a very special sort for nearly 20 years. And we've worked together on the Global Music series of 28 volumes that Oxford University Press has published, as well as a textbook called Global Music Cultures, which takes in 15 world cultures and works them through listening and viewing and conceptual understandings in rather practical applied experiences. So thanks to all who have helped me along, and we do help one another. Another tribute, this one to David McAllister, one of the great American ethnomusicologists whose work was in indigenous Hopi Navajo music. And he spoke to the importance of the people making music, all people, anywhere making music, and the importance of learning music orally and understanding it from oral channels. Learning music that is vernacular music, popular music, public music, and learning the music of all classes and cultures, and not only the aristocratic and elite cultures of the Western art music that had been for a very long time our major music to be learned in conservatories, in university departments of music, and certainly in schools as well. David McAllister and many others have helped us to understand that we are all connected, ethnomusicologists as well as music educators. And over time and across place and through work in music and with people, we share a great deal, we intersect. And we have musicological scholarship, music education in practice at workshops. Are we separate entities, or are we in fact colliding and intersecting, overlapping in so many ways? The Society for Ethnomusicology, which is US-based but is internationally alive, features workshops as well as scholarship. And on the other hand, the American Society for Research and Music Education indicates that such music education activity is not all about practice, workshopping, and such, but is also about scholarship, about understanding learning and teaching processes from a scholarly perspective. So perhaps both fields, we would say, have scholarly cores as well as applied educational interests, goals. And so in these ways, we are overlapping and crisscrossing. And we look here to the two images to the left an adult Indigenous American Indian in full regalia, dancing his music. And to the right, a very young child learning the heritage of the music by watching, by listening, and in time, joining in. And we see another crisscrossing and overlapping set of images. On the left, an adult Balinese musician backed up by the Balinese gamelan, and over to the right, a young girl beginning to learn her Balinese dance and music heritage. And we care in ethnomusicology about the origins and the developments from childhood through, again, master musicians at the professional level. We care about the spin out through our music education practice of great musics and where they come from and how they are transmitted, taught, and learned. Ethnomusicology and music education are both about the music, as well as about the people who make the music, who enjoy the music, who identify with the music. And in some ways, educators are performing ethnomusicology as they teach it, as they teach music of world cultures in university classrooms, as well as in K-12 classrooms. And in my own program at the University of Washington, we have this kind of collaborative venture. And I'm sure that is the case too in so many programs in the Asia Pacific, where we've got people in ethnomusicology thinking about teaching and learning, and people in music education thinking about how do we open the channels of many musics into the lives of our students for the sake of musical education and the growth of intercultural understanding. We find that there are common ethnomusicology and music education interests. We care about transmission, music cognition, mind-body music dance dualities, children's musical cultures, and of course the pedagogy of global and local musics. And we care about and we do research on musical thought and behavior. And I found it fascinating that Timothy Rice had cited something that I had said, written, whatever, in his Oxford book, A Short Introduction to Ethnomusicology, because I do think that we've got plenty of evidence to indicate that ethnomusicologists, as well as music educators, share these interests. Pedagogical integrity. Truly, the integrity of teaching, learning music requires our work as teaching musicians and as music educators, and our aims to know the music before we teach it, to know the musical meanings, the context, the functions before we teach it, to know the learning process and to know it well in order to teach it, and frankly, to know the learners with whom we are working so that we can fit the pedagogy in a way that does indeed have deep roots and an intent about it. And every now and then you'll see in these slides EM plus ME, as college music education together offer insights through collaboration. Here is our one at University of Illinois with so many rich quotes. And he said at one point, each system of music education, school districts, university programs, national curriculum should include 1, Western classical music, 2, local musical traditions, and 3, something of the music of the rest of the world. And I love it. He said it, and he's been a shining light in much of our work in educational practice. He also said that learning to love the music and the people whose music it is very important for ethnomusicologists. You'll see his quote here. When I began studying ethnomusicology, my first experience was hearing music of the Native Americans of the Plain region. At that time, the last thing I would have said was that I considered this music beautiful. That might have come later, and surely in various ways, the people whose music it is consider it an aesthetic experience. But for me, I had to learn to love it. Had to learn to love it. Here he is, giving a talk just about 3 to 4 years ago and making the point of what ethnomusicologists do and whether ethnomusicologists are doing any good.
Asked, are you doing anyone any good? And indeed, especially since about 1990, ethnomusicologists have developed an interest in diverse areas, such as an intercultural approach to the role of music in medicine and healing, and the possible uses of music in conflict resolution, and an interest in the legal protection of the world's musicians, in playing a role in music education, and in helping indigenous societies to preserve their heritage, helping everyone to accept strange and exotic sounds, and thus their people into our musical universe.
And we heard that. Notable for all of us in ethnomusicology and in music education practice, helping everyone to accept strange musical sounds, that is to say, unfamiliar sounds, and thus to accept their people into our universe. And if that doesn't spell music for intercultural understanding, I don't know what does, huh? So he poses the question, are we ethnomusicologists doing any good? And he mentions, yes, certainly. We're making inroads, music, medicine, and healing, music and conflict resolution, the legal protection of musicians, the sustainability of indigenous heritage, and the musical education of the masses. We are doing good. Music learning and pedagogical integrity have to do with these questions. We care to know the answers to how do we learn strange musical sounds? How do we teach and facilitate musical experiences in culturally unfamiliar traditions and practices? How do we teach and learn music and then teach and learn culture through music? And then how do we learn to love the music, the culture, and the people? And truly, ethnomusicology and music education together offer insight. Ethnomusicologically speaking, we can and we do teach music as sound, music as cultural behavior, and music as cultural value. We get that understanding cultural value in music requires knowledge of the musical context, understanding why the music is performed, where it's performed, when it's performed, who are the people who perform it. And I bring up here an image of Natpwe out there in Myanmar, in Burma. To hear the music is not to understand it, not very well. But as we begin to understand why it happens and what its history may be and who the people are performing it, well, context matters, and it deepens an understanding of the music and the people. Understanding cultural value requires knowledge of the musical context of even a children's song. And I bring up, I've been working on the railroad. This is a song we all sang as children at one time, but we did not know. It's been recently the efforts of music educators decolonizing music practices and curricular gems, supposedly historic songs, as well as ethnomusicologists that gave rise to the fact that some music simply cannot be valued and transmitted any longer in our curricular practice. Ethnomusicologists and music educators, it seems, do recommend listening for pedagogical integrity. And the listening is to the music, listening carefully to the recordings, the video recordings, listening to the musicians who make the music, through interviews, to what they have to say, but also listening to our learners, our students, and what sorts of reactions and responses they have, and what sorts of music they value, and maybe why they do not value the music that we hope to bring to their attention. Listening to the world is what we do in our very best pedagogical integrity. And both ethnomusicology and music education offer insight in that realm. There are resources for teaching world music cultures, and they have come about through the efforts of ethnomusicologists as well as music educators. There are human live resources that we love to have in our classes, and there are also mediated media sources that we do use in our teaching and learning. Clearly, culture-bearing community musicians are a wonderful thing to have at hand. And if they can't be 3D, then perhaps they are at least zoomed over into our classrooms now that we've discovered, understand what Zooming is all about. Some of my favorite culture-bearing community musicians right here. But there are also media sources, and I want to bring to mind the efforts of ethnomusicologists and educators in working with the Association for Cultural Equity, this vast archive that started with the work of Alan Lomax and has continued on. Many American traditional cultural expressions, but also global traditions. The spring out of the global jukebox, which was Alan Lomax's idea, and which have become, which has become an interesting repository of many musical forms and sonic structures. And now there's a small curriculum. If you go into Global Jukebox, you will find that there's been an ethnomusicologist educator effort to put together a set of just over 40 slide sets of music and contextual bits of information for bringing music of various cultures into classrooms. We look at Smithsonian Folkways recordings, and we know that the staff consists of many ethnomusicologists, some of them with strong educational leanings, who have brought to the label and into the archives some beautiful recordings and video recordings that are now being used in our university classrooms and in some of our secondary and elementary school music classes. Here's our ethnomusicologist of old, John Blacking. And we can recall his discovery of children. He said children are not simply musical embryos waiting to become musical adults. They have a musical culture of their own with their own musical and social rules. And he wrote about Venda children's culture. And to him, childhood was a discovery that he had not given his attention to, even though we in music education are giving a lot of attention to children in our everyday work. And I do want to recognize some of the contemporary work that has spun out of Blacking's research and gone in new directions. And that is Andrea Emberley there on the left, who went back to the Venda people, spent 3 years there, and has, in a beautiful way, given voice to the children in ways that I don't think hardly any of us in ethnomusicology had ever done before. And there's a group of us at a recent ethnomusicology conference working with children, giving voice to children. One of the local projects of listening to the children with some cross-cultural relevance is this one, Songs in Their Heads, talking with children, watching children, recognizing, again, the seedbeds, the origins of some pretty interesting musical expressions, some of them more sophisticated that we might have originally conceived of children as having the experience to be able to express. But they do, and we learn from them through projects like this. We're moving toward an ethnomusicology of children, and that has involved ethnomusicologists with educators. There are children who listen to the music of their surrounds, and then there's us listening to the children for what music they know and can express. And we've had a project in which we've looked at, children's musical cultures cross-culturally, and that has involved ethnomusicologists and educators working with children in the music, dance, and even dramatic expressions, artistic expressions that they give forth here and there in the world. We've begun to map some of the world's musical cultures, not enough, and that work still needs to be done for us to recognize as educators interested in children and ethnomusicologists looking at the roots as well as the branches of musical traditions and expressions. We have work to do. Ethnographies of children's musical cultures have sprung up, and they are coming out of the work of ethnomusicologists as well as music educators. So that's a beautiful collaboration. It certainly is an expression of some of our common interests. And then we turn back to the insights that we have brought together from ethnomusicology and music education practice on teaching, on developing human relationships, on developing intercultural understanding through our work as teaching ethnomusicologists, as world-oriented music practitioners and teachers. We certainly have found ethnomusicologists writing textbooks on music of world cultures. And it's fabulous to recognize that we have about 30 years of work by folks with particular fieldwork expertise, deep understandings of the music of one place or another, who have made their way into the compilation of ideas that can be, again, communicated in the work that we do with our university students and also into the K-12 crowd. So some of these textbooks are certainly a manifestation of ethnomusicological interest in teaching and learning. Beyond the textbooks, we want to know, how do we make the music so we can learn to teach the music? And so the workshops are very important. And it's fantastic when we have ethnomusicologists, culture bearers, and music education practitioners all working together. These insights that are collaborative are making for pathways for any of us to be able to make the music, so to teach the music. And some of us have been involved in developing the World Music Pedagogy course or other kinds of workshops so that we can put ethnomusicological sources, music education resources into practice. And we've evolved World Music Pedagogy where the focus is on making the music as well as valuing the people who make the music, the culture bearers, and the contexts in which they work and live. We are finding ourselves approaching the study of global music cultures and giving accent to the people who make the music. And that has been very important coming from ethnomusicologists who have, in fact, I will admit, given music educators a sound understanding of the fact that we who teach children and youth can teach more than musical principles and elemental features. We can teach the reasons why this music comes about and the human cultural meaning of the music. And that is partly by biographical studies of the great musicians who sing and play and dance the music. We have come to developing a sense of, in our students, of this, the kind of ethnomusicological concepts. And this, we think, leads to greater pedagogical integrity. We give attention in our teaching practice to orality, to emic and etic perspectives, to Ngoma as a music, dance, full-fledged artistic experience, to interdisciplinarity as informing us of musical contexts and meanings, and to music as cultural heritage. So these concepts have come surrounding the work that we do, and in fact, the practice of musically educating students of various contexts and learning experiences and ages are very much with attention to these ethnomusicological concepts. In our work in world music pedagogy, we've got a stepwise kind of progression in which listening is at the core, at the bottom, attentive listening, then moving to engaged participatory practice while listening, then moving to an active listening, which gets all the way to learning to perform a piece of music through listening, not through notation. And then moving into creating, making something a little bit different from the origin source as we make this music our own. And then, of course, all the way through integrating meaning and cultural contexts, integrating the people and their stories into the musical experiences. That's our world music pedagogy activity, set of disciplines, 5 in all, and they are very ethnomusicological and music education practice-based. So we're coming to closure. In fact, it is kind of a full circle that we're making here, in that ethnomusicologists and educators are attentive to, are absolutely focused on the transmission of music, in order that we can have musical understanding and connections to people, understandings of culture. And in fact, the interesting thing is we then are all connected. And, from an earlier film, and I can't even remember which one, you may know it, the question comes, can we approach music from both music education and ethnomusicological perspectives? And the answer is both. Yes, we can. Both is good. We come together. We dovetail the fields of ethnomusicology, music education, so that we can get to intercultural understanding. Yeah. And in fact, we see, as we compare to our earlier music education practices, pedagogical practices, that with the splicing of music education with ethnomusicology, we've got, new scapes, new paradigms. We can, and we are opening up to many splendored musical experiences in sound, and with understanding of cultural behaviors and cultural ideas and values. Society for Ethnomusicology strategies were put together in 2017 and should be the 5-year plan, after which another strategic plan will be put together. And just have a quick look at this and see how even the word education or educators or training has now become a part of one organization's interest, one ethnomusicology society's interest in passing it on, transmitting, teaching, learning, and educating. Gets me excited to think that we truly are finding an interface across these, at one point, rather separate entities. What more can we be doing at the interface of ethnomusicology and education to ensure that music of the world's many cultures can be experienced and learned for their sonic structures and sociocultural constructs, and to bring about intercultural understanding through music? What can we be doing? Some recommendations And these are not mine alone. They are probably your brainstorms and may very well be work well underway and in process. But we could be doing more, having more cross-field discussion, reading one another's scholarly works, offering workshops that require us to work together, ethnomusicologists and music educators, with culture bearers. We could be launching collaborative field projects, field work projects, co-writing grant proposals, contributing to community service projects, requiring courses in ethnomusicology and music education for all university music majors, and ensuring a presence of each other on conference panels and committees. We could go the gamut, and it would be a beautiful thing, because the core of our work together is building human relationships in and through music. So why wouldn't we develop relationships, continuing and deepening of relationships between us? Ethnomusicology has the power to create a revolution in music education. And that was John Blacking 50 years ago. Well, okay, 48. But the power is there, and the revolution is high time. And I think, we can feel it. That in fact, music teaching and learning is undergoing a beautiful wave of change. So that concludes this time together, Integrities at the Music Learning Interface, collaborative efforts in pursuit of intercultural understanding. And I thank you. Look forward to a little bit of dialogue, and would love to see you 3D. Would welcome you to the Pacific Northwest, out here to Seattle at some point. And I know that I've seen some of you here in Seattle at the University of Washington. Let's stay tuned. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. She will now be joining us live from Washington to respond to your questions. And that first one I saw was from Dr. Tan Suibeng. Dr. Tan, would you rather address the question yourself, if you can turn on your microphone? Suibeng.
Hi, Pat. Long time.
Hello, how are you doing, Susan?
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation on the teaching of world music in the USA. Actually, my question is about the convergence of the teaching of music history, which refers to Western classical music and world music, right? Because here we teach Western classical music, Western history as Western classical music history, and then the non-Western music and others come under one other category. So this is, I think it's the status of traditional music is sort of lower than Western classical music. So I would like to ask if there is a convergence of the two in America and the rest of the world.
Oh, such a good question. Thank you so much, Suibeng. We have hoped for the convergence for a long while. We see it in some places, and yet in some of our very own institutions, certainly mine, we continue the ideal of 19th century conservatory teaching practice and priorities, such that every undergraduate student will have 3 sessions, that is 3 terms in music history. Music history without any attention to the fact that it really is Western music history. And in a 4-year program, there is 1 required course in ethnomusicology. It seems that we're past time to make the change, and thankfully there are institutions where these ideas are starting to come together, that we may be truly delivering on music in its many colors, its grand variety, There certainly are attempts in textbooks, in policies, in particular mandates that have come out of organizations that we should be teaching music across the board, that we should be looking for language that could potentially be used to refer to music of art and traditional and folk and popular expressive practices anywhere in the world. So, I mean, I was working, for example, with Bonnie Wade in a project that we recently put out with 15 other contributing ethnomusicologists, global music cultures. And like many other world music textbooks, we're trying to make the point, of course, that you know, all music is meaningful and useful. Let's figure out how in one place and in another. And all music has pitch and duration. Let's figure out the nuances. Let's find the meanings behind these supposed sonic components. There's an interesting text out recently too by Tim Rice, where he is looking at histories of music, plural. I think he's got 5 or 6 different music histories and all kinds of sonic features that go along with it. And I don't remember the title of this textbook about 2 years ago, but it should be making the rounds. And I do know there are some music historians on college university faculty here in the US that are starting to use Tim Rice's book as a means of looking at histories plural. And I think that if some of these textbooks could be put into play, we might have, because sometimes the response is, well, you know, this is how I was trained as a musicologist, as a music historian, so I'm just going to go here in a single-minded way. But when, in fact, we've been chipping away for some 50 years to talk about you know, music plural, we see that there are materials now that folks can utilize and take forward in music major courses, in courses for music minors, and certainly for university students across the board who are enrolled in our classes. So I'd like to think that we were moving beyond the colonized notions of music, and it's a slow go. It's a gradual process, and I'm hopeful that we are on our way. But we have certainly been waiting pins and needles for a long while for the change. Thank you for the question, Suibang.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. There are 2 more questions in the Q&A box. I don't know, Dr. Campbell, if you have access to it. Our time, however, is over. So may I ask you if you can kindly just respond to the answer by typing it right in the QA box. And I ask everybody else who wants to address a question to Dr. Campbell to just type it in the Q&A box and address it to our speaker. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry it's a very rich topic that you have presented to us, this crisscrossing of ethnomusicology and music education. We have 2 more very interesting panels today, panels 5 and 6 on pedagogy. And I'm sorry, we have to move on to this 2 sessions. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Campbell, and to the audience. Please continue sending your questions in the Q&A box, and our speaker will respond by typing her answers there. Thank you.
Thank you.